It's time for our final session of the day. I'd like to invite Juan Benet, who is the creator of Falcon and the CEO of Protocol Labs, and Alan Ransel, who is the lead of the Filecoin Green project, to join me, or to join each other, should I say, for a fireside chat. And I invite the audience to pop some questions into the chat, and if they get the chance, they'll have a look at those and answer them. Thanks so much. Over to you, Juan and Alan.
Thank you so much, Angie. It's really great to just be here today with everybody. This has been a phenomenal discussion. We've looked at so many different really critical components of making this set of projects a reality. So it really has been a phenomenal day. And I think we're advancing the space a lot by just having these discussions, but making plans and following through with them over time. A huge honor for me to just be here with all of you and sharing the stage. What I want to do through this discussion is to help spotlight the Falcon Green project and ask a bunch of questions of Alan, who started and has been leading this project, and to hear about other goals in the future and so on. So along the way, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Alan, or about the project in general, just put them on chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat here, and then I'll be pulling from those over time. I have a set of questions to go through. So just to help make this session a little bit of self-standing, I'll just quickly introduce Falcon Green again. So the goal of Falcon Green is to lead the way in renewable computing infrastructure, starting with the world's largest decentralized storage network. And to do this, the project builds tools to measure environmental impact and reduce it, with the ultimate goal of making the network a verifiably net environmental good. And it's my honor to be interviewing Alan Ransel. Alan is a project lead for Falcon Green and has been at Protocol Labs as the in-house expert on energy and the environment since he got his PhD from MIT in 2018. He has worked on many different aspects of renewable energy, including doing academic research on solar cells, batteries, the power grid, and so much more. It's really great for the Falcon network to be able to count on the expertise of many people like Alan, who are here to help make these networks dramatically better for the world. Great. So just starting off, Alan, can you tell us how did Falcon Green start, and what was help us understand sort of where this initiative is coming from, and how it came to be?
Yeah, thank you, Juan, for the introduction, and everyone for the amazing conversations that we've been having today. Yeah, I mean, so we've been interested in sort of these two complementary aspects of what we're doing for a long time, right? So one thing is how can we decarbonize Filecoin? Right. And then this other question is, what can Filecoin and crypto do to sort of upgrade environmental accounting? Right. And so so Michael Hammersley and I have been sort of exploring a lot of these ideas in Protocol Labs research for a while, looking at things like distributed power grids and looking at ways that we can sort of use crypto to upgrade how energy works, how energy is accounted for, how energy is moved around, do things like peer-to-peer transactions, make apply design principles from distributed systems to distributed power grids to try to make them more resilient and reliable. I think once Filecoin launched a year ago, happy birthday Filecoin, it really just became clear, as you can see the network capacity growing, that there was this opportunity to apply a lot of these things that we've been thinking about to Filecoin specifically, right? And sort of build this sort of Web3 infrastructure for dealing with renewable energy and sort of dogfood it on the network itself. And I also want to give a huge shout out to Angie, who's been emceeing today, and the panel for really really just having sort of a sixth sense for sort of what needs to happen when, and really pushing a lot of this along too, and really saying okay, these are the sorts of tools that would be really, really useful to have sort of right now, and sort of allowing this work to come out of all of that.
It's so critical in those moments to just get encouragement and guidance from operators, and just phenomenal. I'm sure she's watching at the moment, but she's really phenomenal in helping steer many groups over time. Can you tell us maybe something that Angie helped you to orient on to really make this a reality, right? So there's a huge difference often in projects when they're just getting off the ground. They could go in many different possible directions, and sometimes someone can give you the inspiration or the direction or help point you the way. Can you maybe share like what was like one of those examples of like really got this off the ground and happening? Because it's really awesome to be where we are now, and the project is headed in really great directions. But like sort of like when projects start like this, it's super interesting for other people to hear, so that they can also start their own things.
I think a lot of it came out of sort of conversations that Angie was having with people in the ecosystem, and really, a lot of things that were discussed on the panel, right? This sort of the twin aspects of people wanting to be involved in Filecoin, but wanting to ensure that what they're doing is, environmentally, either positive or not as, not environmentally destructive, like, a lot of the sort of discourse surrounding this is, right? In talking to, I think, particular projects that wanted to be involved and sort of be partners, but had those concerns, I think she really saw, okay, you really need to connect these dots of saying, okay, if you take this action, what impact is that going to have, right? Which has been sort of a holy grail in the broader sort of environmental accounting field for a long time, right? I was talking to people who manage investment portfolios, and they would really like to be able to say, okay, what are the emissions of our investment portfolio, and what can we do to take actions to decrease them, right? And a lot of those tools are being built in Web 2, but things aren't really verifiable and they aren't really that interoperable. I think taking a lot of sort of the way that Web3 deals with data, right, that you've described as the Merkle forest, right, where if you hash link all these data structures, they aren't just sort of verifiable and interoperable in the context of the thing you're building, but they are part of this sort of larger universe of verifiable interoperable data structures, right? And like it's that sort of the power of working with data that way, which is really core to IPFS and Filecoin, is really what we're going to need to give people the ability to track these environmental impacts many levels throughout a supply chain. Angie, has really just seen how in like very specific projects, when, people have particular concerns, how can we like build the actual tools that are going to be necessary to address those particular concerns, and then do that in a way that's really scalable and reusable and open source.
In the interest of looking at all of what the whole village that it takes to get efforts off the ground here, who else is working on Falcon Green? So we've heard from a number of folks today, and we've heard from partners and from storage providers that are already getting involved. But who's working on sort of like getting all of the tooling in place and so on?
So Angie and Emily in ecosystem have been working a ton on all different aspects of Filecoin Green. The Sentinel team, which is building this database to really give us tools to better understand what's happening on chain at any given time. They've been super helpful for sort of building out the ability to understand forgiving miner ID, or be able to sort of work with on-chain proofs and then translate that right into energy use. And so especially Hector, Ian, and Mike have been fantastic there. The reputation system team, right? So we're building all of these tools and aiming to integrate them with the reputation system, so that when a client wants to store data on Filecoin, one of the factors that they're able to account for is which miner ID is actually buying renewable energy, right? And so the reputation system, especially Deep and Alex, have been incredibly helpful at adding that functionality and sort of integrating these tools into the whole rep system. SPs who are really sort of leading the charge on a lot of this, the sort of amount of sort of creativity and passion that they bring into how to think about these issues has been incredibly helpful and inspiring. And participating in the demonstrations that we're building, contributing a lot sort of intellectually to this, sharing data with me so I can build models of energy use and sort of relate proofs to actual power bills, right, has been extremely useful. And we're going to publish some of that soon. And in addition to the amazing SPs who were on the panel today, Nelson Chen and Stuart Bergman have also been super helpful, and also Rob Quist. And then I think the other sort of big group of people who have been contributing a lot to this are sort of other organizations, especially the EWF folks, some of which you heard from today, and they're really sort of the farthest along in building Web3 native tools for interfacing with existing environmental attribute markets, and also the CCA for really sort of leading the charge on getting everyone sort of rowing in the same direction. And then also Digital Mob is a dev shop that's been super helpful in terms of actually sort of building some of this tooling.
Thank you to everybody who's been pushing all this along. This is a phenomenal project, and this is just the beginning of something really great. So I look forward to helping push this along and help you orient the entire network towards a much better future. So let's dive into the tech. So can you tell us how much energy Falcon uses right now? Like, just kind of get a sense of the scale of what we're talking about.
So our best guess right now is that it is something like 130 megawatts, something like that, which accounts for several things, right? So firstly, that's the energy to seal files, right? So to onboard storage to the network. Secondly, it's the energy to store those files over time, right? And we can see that on chain, right? There's a proof corresponding to sealing a sector. Then there's a series of proofs, one every day, to verify that the sector is continuing to be stored over time, right? So we have this sort of anchor in the chain that corresponds to energy use. And then that is something called power usage effectiveness, or PUE, which is a measurement of the sort of overhead that goes into running a data center operation. So that's things like cooling and losses from stepping power down to power electronics, all of that stuff. And so that's the best estimate, right, is about 130 megawatt hours, which is roughly 1% of Bitcoin, sort of based on the estimates that are out there, with the really important difference, right, that this is energy that's used to actually provide a service, right? This is actually used to store files. It's not just energy that is used to secure the chain, although it also does secure the chain, right? And then I think a good way of making a comparison there, comparing a network, Filecoin, which does this useful thing, store data, to Web2 technologies that do the same thing, store data. A good sort of point of comparison is about Filecoin has a capacity of about 0.5% of the rest of estimated data storage in DCs right now, and that energy use is also around 0.5%. So that's sort of the rough comparison you can make there right now. And with, of course, the important caveat, right, that we're working with Heralds and others to refine these models over time. And this is sort of a first stab at this problem, but we're really committed to doing a better job at really sort of understanding what the power use is and other sort of environmental impacts of the network too.
That's a pretty large amount of energy. It is not as big as many as other blockchains, or as big as all of the data centers in the world, of course. But it's very sizable. So we should take responsibility of making sure that all of this is green and headed in a really good direction. From what you're saying, it sounds like Filecoin operation is roughly similar to normal data center operation. Does that mean, so initially we were pretty worried that sealing, for example, which is a pretty energy intensive operation, might be worse than a normal data center workload and so on. What is your thinking so far on this? Is it worse? Is it normal? Is it under?
So if you think of energy to store data and then operations being done on that data, right? So the energy used to store data is similar, right, according to this estimate. And then the operations done on data, sealing is roughly corresponds to workloads in normal data centers, is sort of a good way to parse that.
And that's because in normal data centers today, a lot of them have a lot of GPUs and maybe are doing machine learning training and optimization and whatnot. So we're sort of using commodity hardware, I'm guessing, and because we're using commodity hardware, then you sort of match DCs, and we don't have to do go to something more esoteric or something that where it's not as optimized.
Yeah, and like I think also in particular, once you've sealed the sector, right, you've set up all these proofs with all these snarks to allow you to prove over time that you're storing that data. The actual energy consumption of producing one of those proofs and post over time, that is basically trivial compared to the energy use of sealing and storing the data. So those along with overhead are sort of the big energy consumption.
And even there, I think there's probably a lot of room for improving the energy efficiency of sealing over time. Like new ports might arrive that can improve the energy expenditure and so on. So how do you anticipate that energy use will change as the network matures? So of course, just mentioned port up as one possibility. What are some other possibilities that you see along the way in the network as it expands?
Yeah, as the proofs team is working on more efficient proofs, that is gonna lower the energy cost of sealing over time. Definitely, that's true. Then I think the other big thing to note is that as you add capacity to the network, the energy use is going to become dominated by the data that you are storing sort of in steady state, not the growth, right? So as the network matures over time, it's going to sort of asymptotically get closer to a normal data center because this one term for sealing, that's sort of that extra load, is extra work that's proportional to the rate of growth, and it's the rate of growth relative to sort of the integral of all growth up to that point, right? So if you're storing a huge amount of data, then that's your main energy consumption, right? And because posts are really efficient, that is not a particularly energy intensive component of the network.
That sounds like then what we need to focus on in the long term is energy efficiency in the same way that commodity data centers do, which means better drives, better commodity server hardware, and just like better DC type, better data center tech and so on, which really aligns the incentives of the Falcon network with the rest of the world in terms of not creating like custom hardware or custom systems that are different and whatnot. Like the sealing process is a little still in commodity hardware, but it's a bit of a different process than most data storage networks in the world. So that's great news. And do you have a sense of like how far away that carrying capacity, like the network being the energy use of the network being dominated by the data being stored will kind of cross over, or also, it's sort of the so maybe you don't have that estimate yet.
We're at a point now where they are fairly comparable, right? So it's I don't know I don't remember what exactly the percentage is, but it's energy to store and energy to seal at the moment, sort of instantaneously, are pretty even. And so, as it grows over time, you would expect it to sort of asymptotically get.
That's great. So it sounds like we're at or close to that crossover point. Is then from with the current growth rate and so on at the network, or even if the network starts growing at a faster rate, we're fairly close to energy being dominated by just the carrying of the data and so on. That's great. So great. So let's dive into making all of the energy use green. So can you describe Falcon Green's approach, at a high level?
So I think we really need to set goals, right, for what we want to achieve. And this sort of long-term vision is to be able to make the overall network environmentally positive. And so what that means is we need to have a really granular understanding of what the environmental impacts are of the network right now. And we are sort of farthest along, and the research in general, right, is farthest along on estimating the electricity use to run the network, right? So as Harold said a bit ago, there's basically no academic work or very little academic work on like life cycle analysis or embodied emissions, right? And we really need to build that out and are going to build that out in the future. But we're sort of farthest along on what's called scope 2 emissions, which is emissions from electricity that you use in your operation, right? And so the sort of big picture is we really need to we're setting this goal of wanting to buy more renewable energy than we use, wanting to pull more carbon out of the air than is embodied in the hardware that we use. And so what that means is there are sort of two components, right? We need to understand in a very granular way what those impacts are. And so we're building those tools right now and working with academics, including Harold and others, to do a really, really rigorous job sort of understanding those impacts. And then we need to connect those impacts to things like renewable energy markets, right? And so that's the piece where we're partnering with EnergyWeb and looking at what are the different options, right, for doing sort of in the context of Filecoin, right? This distributed system, which is very different from the systems where people have sort of scaled up, this sort of environmental accounting before. How can we do a very cognizant job of connecting, for example, energy use to existing renewable energy markets, right? We don't want to invent the wheel and come up with some entirely new standard, right? We're really saying sort of, okay, if you have a miner ID that is in this location, how can we do a very rigorous, transparent job of connecting you to the existing rec registries that are monitoring renewable energy in that area, right? And how can we make that sort of as rigorous and transparent? As Alex was saying from Seal Storage, the transparency here is really, really crucial. How can we make that as rigorous and transparent as possible? And then I think what we're really trying to do too is help catalyze the sort of existing industry best practices to become better, right? And so one example of that is it's sort of industry best practice. If you're a big company in sort of the legacy economy, you estimate your energy use for an entire year, and then you buy renewable energy credits, RECs, that were produced 6 months before that year, during that year, or 3 months after that year, right? So if you want to achieve something where you have this closer tie-in between energy use and renewable energy production, this sort of 21-month accounting window is like not ideal, right? And so this was something that Kevin mentioned in the panel from Picnic, is that we would really like to move toward closer standards to really match renewable energy use to production, right? And so we're trying to shorten that accounting period. We're looking at 1 month for this next round of this program that we're doing. And then also engaging with groups like Energy Tag, which is building standards for very, very granular sort of 1 hour matching, or, to support 24/7 renewables. And really looking at how can we build functionality that is useful in the Falcon network. And then also how can we support building tools that are going to be useful in other crypto networks and in the sort of broader economy beyond that.
If I can highlight one of the things I love about this approach is setting strong goals, building tools, go after low-hanging fruit, make some significant, impactful moves, but not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, and just start the process of turning Falcon green, and then over time increasing kind of pressure for more and more systems and more processes to become greener and more optimized and so on. So I think this is awesome, and I think it has a very high likelihood of not just working because it's already working. It's being super impactful in turning Falcon into the greenest blockchain in the world, and in really paving the way for the broader crypto industry and for storage networks in general. So you mentioned renewables and renewable energy credits and so on. And before, I've also heard a ton about carbon offsets and carbon credits and whatnot. So why buy renewable energy credits instead of carbon offsets? Can you sort of unpack that for us?
So like I said, we're trying to be very intentional about when we make these claims, what exactly is that claim tied to, and make that very transparent and very verifiable. And so the difference, so RECs, or renewable energy credits, always correspond to the generation of 1 megawatt hour of power in some regional power grid. And they have standards that already exist for how you track that power, right? And you can generally trace this REC back to the specific project that was used to generate that, right? So that's really what we're saying is like, okay, if you are storing, say you operate a Web3 company, right, that is storing data for clients on Filecoin, right? We want to build tools that would support you in, if that client wants to know, that client could ask you, you could tell them, okay, I stored that data with this miner ID, then that miner ID is traceable back to this particular certificate, right? Which has, comes from this particular wind farm or solar farm with like these GPS coordinates. And you can see in the REC registry that the REC registry knows that this miner ID bought that power, right? So it's like, can we really, really unambiguously map renewable energy many levels throughout a supply chain, right? And so that's really what you can do with RECs, and that's why we're starting with RECs. Offsets are just sort of a less mature market, right? So there's a lot of different things that offsets can mean. The goal of offsets, right, is always to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And people are doing a lot of work and developing great standards on, how to really tell, is this a good offset, right? But we're starting with RECs because that's really where you can get this very unambiguous, clear mapping to let people know exactly what you're claiming.
That seems like a great strategy and a great trade-off of the conditions. So it sounds like over time, so both the REC registry helps us understand also the specific environment, plants and the specific places that the energy is coming from, which also add verifiability both ways, right? Like some of these plants might be better than others. And so over time, you can kind of measure how high quality all of the energy being produces and potentially ratchet up the quality. And maybe for carbon offsets and other kind of credits and so on, maybe we can be a pressure there in expressing what things have to look like, so that we as a network might consider using those. So maybe I think for the project to consider is maybe describing like what you would like to see in those systems, so that they make sense for us, and then publishing that so that then builders in those systems know kind of what to target and how to orient ourselves, because already Falcon is pretty large and is using an enormous amount of energy. As we get bigger and as the network keeps growing, it'll become a larger and larger load on the grid and a larger and larger factor. And so if we can be super green and we have a published set of requirements of how we would like to engage with some of these other markets and other assets and so on, then maybe those groups can actually turn around and do work towards satisfying the needs of the Falcon network. So let's maybe talk. So we've talked about RECs, we've talked about carbon offsets. What about the hardware? So at the end of the day, you're buying some piece of hardware to help run the network, either primarily storage providers, but also some other developers and so on. The manufacturing of that hardware involves all kinds of processes that might be pulling, those processes may themselves not be green and so on. How do we deal with this? How do we reason about it? How do we maybe select better hardware than others? How do we offset that? Could we maybe estimate some of this?
Yeah, I think we would really like to be able to trace, right, not just emissions, but other types of environmental impacts, right? And so, people are looking at, increasingly sort of recycling electronics, right? And currently electronics disposal is this sort of major source of pollution. Right, we'd really like to be able to trace, and, Web3, dealing with data in sort of a Web3 native way should allow us to do this much better. Things like, okay, where did the tantalum in my device come from, right? Like, how can we work with members throughout the supply chain to really get a very granular view of, actually what are those environmental impacts, and how can we, once we have visibility into that supply chain, what can we do to lower, so first reduce and then mitigate those environmental impacts, right? And so I think, like you said, Filecoin, is buying a lot of electricity. And so that means we, as a network, can potentially put pressure on the producers of electricity, or if we buy a lot of offsets, we can put pressure on the producers of offsets to conform to a higher standard, right? So the Falcon network also buys a lot of hardware. So it makes sense to try to work with companies supplying that hardware, who are going to conform both to good environmental practices, and also to higher standards of traceability in those practices, right? And then I think also looking sort of downstream the other way, right? So the storage providers in their panel were talking about how that type of traceability can be really important for clients, right? Or investors, right? And so I think there's a huge opportunity for us sort of in the middle of the supply chain, sort of on both sides, to really nucleate those tools and have them sort of grow in both directions, so that we're able to trace those sorts of impacts. And there's just so much both to research here, and so much to build here. And so please join the Phil Green Slack channel to be involved in building out sort of all of this.
That's great approach to it. And I think over time, though we're starting with the largest and most important part of the network, the source providers, I think we can also start extending a lot of that same kind of measuring and same kind of indications to developers as well. So there's a lot of software infrastructure that developers and different application providers have and run, and we don't yet have computing clouds that are fully decentralized and whatnot. So we can probably build some information on that as well over time, and sort of apply the same kind of thinking across to all of the different participants. So source providers, ritual providers, eventually developers, and who knows, maybe clients as well at some point. So can you maybe describe what happens when SPs, when search providers buy RECs? We heard about how it gets connected to the registry. We've heard about kind of how you can trace it. But what exactly happens in the energy? Can you maybe express for us what is that actually doing?
Yeah, renewable energy markets are complicated, right? And so what we would like to do, right, is transition the power grid to be 100% renewable, right? That's sort of the goal. So RECs are one of the mechanisms that people have built over the past few decades to enable companies and individuals to try to do that, right? And so what happens when, say, a solar farm produces a megawatt hour of electricity, that electricity goes into the grid, so it goes into the wires, and the renewable attributes of that electricity are tracked and packaged into a REC, or renewable energy credit. And so the idea is that if you consume power on the same power grid, you can buy that REC, and then you own those renewable attributes. And it's sort of like you just got power directly from that solar panel, right? It is not exactly like you got power just directly from that solar panel, because you aren't necessarily consuming power exactly when that solar panel was producing it, right? And the existing grid doesn't have a lot of storage in it, so power in has to equal power out on sort of a very granular basis. And so what the really positive thing about that, right, is that it provides a revenue stream to developers of solar and wind and hydro and other projects that make it clear that you're going to be able to get money from this extra source when you develop additional renewable energy capacity. And that's really positive. And that's how a lot of grids have become lower emissions over time, right, is using this mechanism. As we move forward, right, and we reach really higher renewables penetration in the grid, this question of, are you using renewable energy at the same time as it is being produced, becomes increasingly important, right? And so I think that's one of the major challenges right now in greening the grid, right? Is the intermittency of renewables and the lack of storage. And so that is something we're thinking a lot about, is how can the tools that we build, firstly, give us this very granular ability to really understand when is the network using how much power? And then secondly, what can we do to sort of play a role in raising those standards in order to come up with this sort of better matching? But that's sort of a quick summary of what happens when you buy a rec and what's good about the existing system that we're plugging into, and where can we sort of put some pressure to try to improve it, where we would really like to build towards something like 24/7 renewable, and are working with SPs to install local solar capacity there, and are also working with groups like Energy Tag, which are developing these standards, right? Because these standards need to exist, right? The standards for existing recs are already out there, but the standards for super granular hour-to-hour recs aren't out there yet. And so they need to exist, and we need to build projects that use them in order to sort of push the entire industry forward.
So far in a lot of conversations, and just in general, this is how the world tends to target things. Everyone's trying to get to zero and get to, basically trying to match their energy expenditures with just as much renewables and whatnot. Earlier today, I was like, hey, we should be, 10xing that. We should be offsetting 10 times more than we use, or having some factor like this. Does this make sense, or is this kind of like a too aggressive? When you hear like a bold claim like that, does that make sense? Is that crazy? Can we actually do that? Is 10x like feasible? Especially think about as the network grows.
What we can do by setting those really aggressive targets, right, is play a role in catalyzing the transition of the grid to 100% renewable, right? One aspect to this, right, is that we are estimating Falcon energy use, and we are, that gives us this upper lower bound and an estimate. And we're in the systems that we're building, we're tying that 100% renewable label to that upper bound for now, which really means that, okay, this is the most electricity that we think that miner ID is using based on on-chain proofs. So let's link to recs that are accounting for that much electricity, rather than some estimate or a lower bound that, even if the estimate is what we think they're actually using, we really want to build that overestimation into the tools to begin with, right? And then secondly, there's no, and this is something that you've talked to me a lot about in conversations for a while, is like, how can we set things up such that 100% is not the upper bound, right? So you get connected to renewable energy that corresponds to your upper limit. Okay, well, you would play more of a role in catalyzing the transition to renewable energy if you bought more recs than that, right? So if you give more money to renewable energy producers in exchange for their product, and they're able to secure this revenue stream, which can then be used in the future to add additional renewables capacity, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense to sort of design these incentive structures to hit targets that are higher than 100%, to say, look, we are confident that we are doing more than our part and really trying to play a pivotal role in decarbonizing the power system.
A question, given the recent rise in NFTs and so on, are these recs actual NFTs, or are they sort of like a claim in some registry somewhere, or how are they represented?
Yeah, so Energy Web has really been pioneering, working on a lot of this, and so as of late October, the RECs that we are buying are going to be recorded on their chain, on the Energy Web chain. And there's a fungible and non-fungible component to one of their EACs. So the idea is they are able to point to the particular device or that produced that renewable energy, and then once a REC broker has taken those RECs and onboarded them to their chain, there is this fungible component that they're able to trade. So say you buy, a gigawatt hour, but someone only wants to buy, 100 megawatt hours, you're able to sell them that piece of that. So it doesn't map exactly onto an existing like ETH, like NFT standard, but it's sort of a standard built particularly for RECs and environmental attribute tracking on the EWF chain.
I think there's utility in matching some of the standards over time, because it'll help the RECs themselves plug into a bunch of the tooling that people are building for NFTs. So right. That's useful. But all of that sounds great and makes sense. What other kind of artifacts do you see generating over time? Like what other kind of like verifiable claims are there that like might be like good projects for people listening that might attend one of the hackathons happening this month or next month around like maybe pushing on the frontier?
It would be really compelling to be able to go from energy used to emissions, right? And we were talking about in chat, part of the CCA work, right, is to come up with carbon accounting standards for crypto that are heavily based on the greenhouse gas standards that are have been under development for more than a decade. And so, in order, there are different sort of established ways of calculating what the emissions are for your operation if you know the energy use, right? And so one example of that is what's called using a marginal emissions factor, which is the idea that if you have some equipment that's running, that's connected to a power grid, you could take your energy use and multiply that by the average for that power grid. That's one way of calculating this, and that's sort of one of these standards in the greenhouse gas emissions standards for calculating emissions. There's you could also say you could take your marginal impact on emissions, which is to say if I flicked off this switch, what generating source would be turned off then, and what is my emissions in a granular way, sort of hour to hour, based on the sort of marginal emissions factor for this local grid. And I think it would be extremely compelling to build tools to allow the grid to see, to allow chains to see that, right, and be able to sort of import that data as a function of location and time to really get those marginal emissions factors and match them with power use.
Are you keeping like a running list of things you would like to see developed? Because it might be like good fodder for hackathons, or you might even consider running a Filecoin Green hackathon at some point.
That'd be really compelling, and we should put that in the channel.
Great. So we've heard about RECs, we've heard about the actual process, we've heard about why we're using RECs now, we've heard about the total energy use of the network, we've heard about kind of like the life cycle for SPs and other groups. How far are we along in this process? How much energy has the network? How much green energy has the network supported so far? Like, so what fraction of our energy use is green?
I think so. In our first showcase, so our first demonstration, where we got a group of SPs together and said, okay, let's just try this. Let's take a bunch of SPs, let's estimate their energy use over the sort of lifetime of their activity on Filecoin, and by RECs corresponding to that energy use. They bought 712, I believe, megawatt hours of electricity. Which is, of RECs corresponding to renewable generation, which is, enough to power 66 American homes for a year, or enough to drive a Tesla. I think about the distance corresponding to here to the moon and back 10 times is a metric.
Perfect.
Yeah. That's the, so I think, so in this next round of that, right? So we've expanded that program, and we're looking at buying about 100 times that much in REX. So about 78,000 megawatt hours or 78 gigawatt hours of renewable energy, which is going to sort of really upgrade the amount of energy that's being purchased corresponding to Filecoin, and make us sort of a bigger player in these markets. And we're really excited to expand.
Awesome. So that's jumping 2 orders of magnitude in one go, which is great, like ambitious, love it. What maybe at that point, like what fraction of the yearly use of energy will that be?
That is a good question. I should go back to the dashboard to look at that. It's like, I think it's I don't want to say a number right now, top of my head.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, either way, like that sounds like a huge jump. That's awesome. I think giving it to us in like fraction numbers or things like that will help us, like will help me and others be like, oh yeah, awesome. Like this is what these numbers mean for us, and it gives us a target to hit, right? Because like if you tell us, hey, if the Falcon Green project tells the broader Falcon network, hey, we're about like 5% of our energy or like 10% of our energy, that gives us a target to hit and helps us frame the effort to get to 100%. But then beyond that, if we really want to hit like 10x and jump another order of magnitude, helps frame up the challenge. But yeah, that sounds great. So how does this compare? That sounds like a lot of energy. How does that compare to other networks? Like where are we on the scale?
The networks that have been active in this so far tend to be other networks that run consensus mechanisms that make their energy use smaller. So right, like proof of stake or some variant of that, which is great. Like if that's compatible with sort of the goals of your community, like you should lower your energy use and you should green that energy use, and like that's fantastic, right? Or then the sort of other category has been, there have been projects that have said that use a lot of energy, right? But have made claims in a way that's less than sort of completely transparent and verifiable, right? So I think really what we're doing is taking this network that uses a substantial amount of energy and greening it in a way that is transparent and verifiable, right? And I think that's really where Filecoin can sort of lead the way in greening crypto, is being this use case and saying, okay, like we actually can be a big player in renewable energy markets, and we can give you all of the tools that you need wherever you are into this ecosystem, to really see not just both the impact of the network overall, but the impact of your particular actions in that network, and really sort of give people that transparency to really start shifting these systems in sort of more verifiably green direction.
And this is why I want to push beyond 1x and get to 2x, 5x, eventually 10x, because it goes from, hey, just clean up after yourself, to being an actively beneficial party in the system. And it goes from, hey, just fixing something you broke, to, oh wow, having Filecoin in this community, having Filecoin in this country is beneficial to all of the green energy producers in this region. And so by going to becoming like an over consumer of renewable energy will both actually help very tangibly orient many other communities towards doing that too, and like over time kind of avert the massive crisis we're in, and try to get to closer to getting to global zero and ideally global net negative. But it'll also kind of along the way help benefit the broader network in general, and it'll help the network grow. So I think this is a lot of times I think is extremely useful to draw the kind of like really important economic business case for something that you want to achieve, right? So Tesla's a great example of this, like saying, hey, we need to move all of cars from fossil fuels to being electricity powered, so then we can power the entire grid with renewables. And it's okay. Well, the way to do it is like by making it just economically like the thing that people want, and have the shiny car make a really nice sports car like kind of thing that everyone wants to buy and whatnot, and then make it with the semis and so on, make it cost effective to do it and so on. So like I think the business case and economic case for a crypto network becoming super green and like a huge consumer can cause a pressure on countries to accept crypto, and then also start asking for more storage providers to come into that region, right? So if a region wants to increase its consumption of renewables and so on, and is investing heavily in renewables, then suddenly it might become, it might start attracting SPs into that region, or start attracting Falcon into that region, so that the Filecoin's green business comes their way. So I think like that can be helpful over time. So so that's awesome. That sounds really good. How do we get to? Is there some kind of like global leaderboard that we can look at where? Because I think leaderboards can be really useful in orienting large communities to go in some direction. So both maybe a leaderboard within Falcon where we can see like different SPs and how they're doing, or ideally like a leaderboard for all of crypto where we can see how all of crypto is doing relative to each other, so we can because that kind of those kinds of systems and mechanisms pressure everyone towards that kind of like group action towards hitting the goal. Do you have like any thoughts on like building these kinds of things, or where do you stand on that?
One of the really compelling things, right, about the sort of design of Filecoin, right, is that because these individual miner IDs, right, are providing a service to clients, and clients need to decide which storage provider they're going to go with, the reputation system sort of automatically gives us the ability to make that leaderboard that you're talking about, right? And so we're continuing to work with the team building building PhilRep to incorporate that and make it really clear and transparent. If you have all these different SPs that are all providing a really good service, who has really prioritized green energy there. I think the second piece of that is that the dashboard that we're building, Filecoin Green, that is going to be released in a few weeks publicly is the target. That is going to have a leaderboard built in once we're able to open up Energy Web 0 to any storage provider that wants to integrate with it, right? So currently we've done these sort of iterations of getting together a group of SPs and purchasing RECs and connecting them to the reputation system. The goal is in Q1 of next year to open up Energy Web 0 to anyone who wants to participate. And I think that's where it's really going to sort of make sense to have this leaderboard integrated into Filecoin Green, where you can really see who's doing that. And then I think in terms of for all of crypto, I think that's more of a hackathon project, and then people are working on a lot of these comparisons. I think we really need to standardize what it means to be a green blockchain, right? And make the bar for that standard extremely high, right? So it should be extremely verifiable, and more than 100%, like you said.
In general, collaboratively competitive mechanisms are really, really useful. So when you can create some competition within a group that overall is collaborative towards some common goal, that tends to cause tons of like action and aligns incentives in the long term. So I think creating this dynamic within the crypto community can really help all of us and help all blockchains become green. What are some of the ways? So already kind of like the competition side of that is like really clear. What are some of the ways that we can collaborate? What are ways that we can interface with other groups and other networks that really care about this? That we're already collaborating with EWF and CCA and others. How can we either help bring other chains to go and collaborate in that way? Or what are other interesting projects that you think we should be collaborating with?
So the CCA has sort of created this hub, right, for a lot of people who are interested in this, and a lot of different chains and groups. And there's a lot of flexibility as to how you work with the CCA, right? You can join as a supporter, which means that you support decarbonizing crypto. You can join as a signatory, which means that you have significant operations and you're committing to decarbonizing those operations on a particular timescale. and it's just sort of this great community where people can work together to share information and hash out standards and build tools to really do this in a verifiable way. And so I think that's extremely a really compelling way to interface with it. Then I think also, pushing towards, there's this group I've mentioned called Energy Tag a few times, which is working on developing standards for granular renewable energy credits. So rather than matching within this 21-month window, they want it to make it possible to match within an hour window, right? And so I think what we can do as people building tools, as SPs, as community members, to to help develop some of those standards and to be early adopters of those standards. So we're really able to say, okay, we're using energy when this solar panel is producing it, I think is going to be extremely effective in, crypto and Falcon catalyzing sort of the next push of renewable energy in power grids around the world.
That's a very compelling mission for Falcon and for the broader crypto world to lead the charge, to have Web3 leading the charge in greenifying energy use by both building the tooling to make all this stuff way more verifiable and higher quality and so on. Also way better markets that can connect to use the energy produced in various different parts of the world and whatnot in better ways. But also to start pushing into large scales to contend with and compare against major industries and start eventually kind of overtaking them. I think that's a phenomenal mission that we can all align with, and we can push forward. It'll take many years to get there, and it'll take all of us sort of working together towards that. But that's really great. So maybe to set benchmarks. How far away is maybe Falcon from, or rather, how can Falcon also help not just other crypto networks, but maybe cloud storage providers that are not yet in the Web3 world, and help them become greener? Or how do we push in that direction, or how do we compare ourselves against those groups which are not kind of like in the blockchain space? They're just kind of normal data centers and whatnot.
I think building, when you were talking about sort of extending these tools to allow developers to work with them, I think building endpoints and standards to really allow people to use granular data on whatever you're doing, right? And chart those environmental impacts and then sort of apply them how it makes sense in your situation, right? So if a data center, right, that maybe isn't in the Web3 world, wants to, use some of the tools that we're developing or helping develop to, give a similar, like very granular interface into what their power use is, and then connect that to, solar or wind or buy RECs or something. I think that's a really compelling use case. Or as people are developing, all sorts of different markets for digital goods, being able to, take your NFT and say, okay, where's it being stored? And where's the power coming from to store it, right? I think is really going to give, a lot of different types of players the ability to sort of upgrade what they're doing, right? And I think that really does, come back again, right, to once we take all of our computing infrastructure and sort of upgrade it with these primitives to make it verifiable and interoperable, we're just going to be able to do things, throughout the economy that are impossible to do with sort of legacy systems.
That's awesome. So then you, as an artist or as an NFT collector or user, you could map to how much green energy the storage and use of this NFT maps to, and you could sort of like vote with your feet in a much more practical way, where you can move which platforms you use and which things you use by moving them into like the networks that are going to cause the most benefit, and again not stopping at zero, like going way higher than that, and really starting to avert the crisis. Speaking of crisis, so we have this is all adding up to this major challenge in the world first of all, thank you for starting this project, and thank you, Angie, and thank you so many other people who have contributed to help make this project, get it off the ground, and have like make a serious effort to both greenify Filecoin, but also use that to greenify all of crypto, and then over time greenify the rest of the world, and kind of provide tooling and better systems to get there. This is it's a huge mission. It's a huge, it's a tall order to avert this crisis. One of the big challenges of our for the entire species and for a generation. Just to benchmark it, I think the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says we have until 2030 to lower carbon emissions 50% from where we are today, which is a staggering amount. And this is not something that like the world is on track to do at all. So how to tell us, like, how aggressive do we need to be here for Falcon and for our community to help push on that and help have the highest impact?
This really ties into a bunch of these themes that have been coming up all through today, right? So in 2018, the IPCC released this report that had a huge impact on me and a lot of other people, where they modeled emissions pathways over the next century, right? And they said, okay, so emissions pathways being how much CO2 or CO2 equivalent is being released, and what would a sort of release as a function of time look like that keeps us below 1.5 degrees of warming, which is, we're close, right? We're like, we don't have a lot of carbon budget left to emit. And what they showed is that in order to, stay below 1.5 degrees and to sort of avert the worst impact of climate change, our emissions basically have to peak around now, like 2020, 2021, and then decrease by 50% by 2030. So like globally, like super bend this curve down. And then most of the pathways they looked at involved significantly negative emissions beyond 2050, right? So like we really have to like take the entire world and transform the economy toward this sort of carbon negative economy. And that's, I think, crypto.
To grab onto the steering wheel of a semi and like yank it all the way really fast, as fast as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like really astounding. And I think that, one of the things that crypto is amazing at, right, is identifying problems and solving them really quickly, right? There's just this tremendous amount of creativity and talent in the industry that is just working full speed at, fixing whatever problems are sort of on their radar, right? And so I think, we really need to sort of turn that as a community to decarbonizing crypto and decarbonizing the world, right? And so I think that, one of the things that we can do in the very near future is buy a lot of renewable energy, which is going to, show that people developing solar and wind have sort of a revenue stream from crypto that, like you said, has the potential to also support, because it supports your sort of local industry, right? There's a, that can be a huge motivating factor for countries and communities wanting crypto to be part of their community, right? And then I think, a second thing we can do, right, is upgrade industry standards and really show that because of the way that we're able to work with data and because we have this sort of very granular estimates as to energy use, we're able to hold ourselves to a higher standard than legacy industry, right? And one of those standards is taking accounting periods and shortening them, ultimately, maybe to a month, and then beyond that to something like 24/7 with like an hour accounting period. And then, I think then the third thing, right, is to not only set those standards high, but also just to make them really verifiable and really transparent. And then I think, once we build those tools and have those primitives and you're really able to take environmental attributes and work with them in smart contracts, right? That's, I think, just going to unlock all of this creativity and energy that we can really, help support and channel toward solving, one of the biggest problems of our time.
There's a very strong possibility that not only a strong possibility, but I think it is very likely that we can do something huge here because the power of crypto comes down to the scale and the speed that you get when you deploy large scale mechanisms, right? So if you design a good mechanism that actually works and has like a smooth gradient that large amounts of users and large amounts of capital and energy and so on can flow into, if that's scalable, then it'll just go as fast as possible. And so I think if we, I think the scaling part will be way easier for us and for crypto 1.3 to do. The hard part is going to be in getting the right structures and the right mechanisms and so on. And so that sounds like we should be stepping on the gas stepping on the accelerator pedal of like your electric car hooked up to a renewable grid. We really need to change that lingo. We should be greatly accelerating the creation of a bunch of all of this tooling, not just for Falcon and for our networks, but for other networks and for other systems. And so this maybe says, hey, have a ton more time and effort be put into hacking on tools like that, or identifying problems and diffusing the fact that those are problems. Many times I find it staggering that there are a bunch of problems that you and other people in the energy community know very well. And a lot of developers and other builders and product people don't know about. And if they did, like they would be able to solve them like relatively quickly. And a lot of times it's just about communicating what problems exist and creating a very strong incentive for causing that. So maybe we should, start, lots of both hackathons and maybe accelerator pathways for teams and communities and startups that help push on a bunch of these like really, really hard problems to solve. So it sounds something like I can help push on, and many other people in listening to this now can help push on. And let's end on that note, which is, what can you do? What can other people? So I was thinking of that as like, what can I do right now to like help this? Let's expand on what can other listeners and what can people in the audience and so on do to help with this massive challenge. So let's just go by some categories. What can so we've heard about storage providers. What would you like them to take away right now that they could do to help push on this?
Firstly, SPs and everyone can join the Phil Green Slack channel, where we're going to discuss a lot more of this and announce things as they become available, and hash out a lot of the standards and get feedback on this. And I think a few things to sort of look out for there are we're going to be releasing this Filecoin Green dashboard in the next few weeks. And you can go there to see what we estimate for a given miner ID, the estimated energy use and upper and lower bounds are. And please give us feedback on that. Help us make it more useful to you, and help us refine our model. If you have more sort of energy data there that we can look at and compare and keep on making that model better over time. Then I think the next thing is we are going to be releasing this EW0 platform to everyone, hopefully in a few months. And please again sign up for that and green your energy use and give us feedback. And then I think the other thing is a lot of SPs, as we heard in the panel, are already doing this, but just really sort of thinking creatively on like, how can your operation be more sustainable? And we really want to expand the tooling to account for different aspects of sustainability, right? So hardware as an example, but also things like digital net metering and building out sort of more of the tools for that.
What can builders and developers and product people do?
As we are building these tools, we really want to give developers the ability to be able to work with environmental attributes and be able to factor those into whatever they're building, right? So, and part of that is transparency, and then part of that is reduction, and then part of that is mitigation, right? And those three are all super, they're separable but crucial aspects of this, right? Is you want to be able to build something where your users can see what their environmental impact is. You want to build something where because of the design choices that you make, and also choices that your users potentially make, they can lower their emissions, right? So data is much more useful if it's actually actionable. And then beyond lowering emissions, being able to mitigate them with say offsets or RECs or these types of things, right? So really thinking along those lines to build that. And we really want to support you in building all of this and making crypto green.
If you're a Falcon community member listening in, not an SP, not a developer, what can they do?
Please join the Slack channel, Phil Green, and we want to hear what initiatives are you part of, and how can we really kind of work with you to build those bridges and build sort of a network of environmentally conscious Web3 actors, right? And really, can we collaborate across chain to, track environmental attributes throughout Web3? Can we work with you to, start hackathons or other events that are going to really sort of catalyze this transition? So please reach out.
I'll suggest that clients should choose SPs that are green. So use PhilRep and go check on their score and choose to use storage providers that are green. And hey, if you're involved in, what about other people that are involved in other crypto communities? What can they do to participate in this project and to help with this challenge?
There's just so much to build, right? So we really want to build this tooling to trace these environmental attributes through whatever project you're part of, right? And so when you're building stuff, make sure that sort of the environmental attributes are really like super verifiable, and see how we can help you in supporting tooling for that, right?
That sounds great, and probably a plug for other communities to join the CCA as well, and help support a lot of these groups that are really helping make all of this successful. Alan, thank you. This has been like super successful. Are you planning to publish a roadmap for the project or something like that? Maybe give us a glimpse into the next few months.
So we're going to be publishing, along with the dashboard, we're going to be publishing, how we got that data, where it came from, and how we're going to be setting these tracks for measuring renewables, right? Where we're going to be able to look at the environmental attributes associated with a given miner ID, and sort of along with that, we're going to publish where we are now, what we've done, and where we see this going, and sort of really what the opportunities are to push all of this forward and accelerate this work.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Angie, for inspiring Alan and helping get all of this off the ground and going. And thank you to so many other people that have been working on making Filecoin green, and in just helping lead the charge. Hopefully we can keep the momentum up, greatly grow by orders of magnitude, and then really help pave the way for the rest of the industry. It's been really phenomenal to see this change, and I think this is something that we can all be really proud of. And there's a ton of work to do and a ton of impact to have. But this is starting us off in a really great direction. And I look forward to checking in yearly and see where we are. So let's set the goal that next let's check in again 1 year from now, and see how much we've done since and where we are. Thank you to everybody participating in the network, and go help save ourselves and the world by making things green. Thank you.